Alright, so now I've moved this thing over here. I've got this chamfering bit in the cordless drill, and I'm just gonna, at pretty high speed, I'm just gonna clean up the edge of the hole lightly. Funny, actually slower speed works a lot better than high. And this is just to make sure that there's nothing sharp to cut the O-ring on the, so this orange O-ring on the fuel injector. See if I can. That orange O-ring, we don't want that thing to get scored while it's being inserted, so it's good to deburr all this stuff. And I'll actually sand the top of it too, sort of the final step. I'm not using any more than the weight of the drill on this. So there we go. Holes are nice and clean, smooth, all chamfered. The only thing I have to do now is, I don't know if I can see through here, but I've got to line bore a little bit to just to deburr it. So I'm just going to run a drill bit in from both ends. That's a little bit smaller than the diameter of the fuel bore, and clean it up a little bit. So next thing I got to do is tap this and this. It'll be like maybe a 3/8 NPT tap, and then polish them and I'll be done. Alright, so I've cut some blanks from some of the scrap rail. You know, this chunk right here, but you can get about 7/8 by 1/2 inch out of it. And I wish I had thought about this earlier, or I wouldn't have been testing so many holes in this stuff and tearing it up. But I managed to get 4 of these blanks. They're all about, let's see, they're all about 1 3/4 inches long. And where they're going to go is, here's the fuel rail, and I took an older piece, this one right here. In fact, you can see it right in there, sort of. I put a fuel injector in this hole and messed with it on the intake until I figured out exactly what I have to remove. This will all make sense when you see it done, but the mounting holes on the intake, it's a little lug that sticks out, and I have to counterbore this so that the injectors line up properly and sit on that little lug properly and whatnot. But the problem is the mounting bolt on that lug is basically right in the middle of this. So I have to add a piece onto this. So I'm going to drill and tap this and countersink a bolt into here that holds it, and then drill through here, and this piece stays, and it sits underneath. You don't really see it, but it's what holds the fuel rail to the intake. So what I've done is cut all my blanks. I put one blank back in my little trusty jig here, put a piece of scrap in there just to hold it, and then put a screw back here to keep this thing from moving. And now I've just marked it down there and put a mark on here because I want all these holes to be the same distance from this end. Even if these are, a 32nd of an inch off, at least relatively speaking, the holes will always be in the same place. So I'm going to clamp this on and drill through it, and then do the same to the other 4. There's 2 on each fuel rail, so I've got 4 in total. And from a depth standpoint, we're drilling all the way through. Two. And incidentally, I'm drilling with my tap bit. So this is the bit that I'm going to use to make the tap, which is a 1024 bolt. Number 3. Bingo. And number 4. Alright, so next I'm going to drill the same hole to a very specific depth in the fuel rail. So this will take me a minute to set up, but I'll be back. Alright, so now I've figured out where this hole goes in the actual rail. This is the part I'm going to thread, and I've marked this end, so I'm going to do them all the same. I already just did this one, so let me move this sucker around and do the next one. You know, I say I'm all going to do them all the same, but I'm not. Two of them are going to be identical, the other two will not, because the distance from the end of the frame rail to the last injector is a little bit different on each end of the frame rail. Not by design, just worked out that way. So if you look, these are two opposite ends of the frame rail. This hole is closer to the end than this one. On the other end, they're identical, so I have sort of a short end and a long end. So I'm going to do the other short end to match what I just did, and then we'll reset and do the other end. Because the tab has to be relative to the last injector hole, not the end of the frame rail. I'm going to clamp it and then just double check it with one of the little blanks that I made. see. And now that I'm doing this, I'm going to match all these blanks to the holes that I'm drilling. So I'm going to mark everything. So the first one I did is A. This one will be B. All right. That's good there. And I've set the depth gauge to the appropriate depth, which is right at 3/8 of an inch. My fuel rail is has about a 1/2 inch of aluminum there underneath the fuel port, so 3/8 gives me plenty of bite for the bolt, and still plenty of clearance from that fuel bore. So now I'm going to switch this thing to the other end and figure out the best place for this. And I'm just eyeing this. I just need to be clear by about a 1/16 of an inch. You can actually overlap it. If you bump it right up to the fuel injector, it actually overlaps the hole. So if I touch the edge of the hole and clear the fuel injector, I'm talking about the edge of the bevel. If I go back about a 1/16 of an inch, that gives me plenty of clearance. And I'm not even going to bother putting a line on the fence. I'm just going to clamp it and mark it as hole C. That's good. So this is C. There we go. And the last one is D. Not that it really needs a mark. Perfect. go. So these 4 holes will get tapped now for the bolts, and then I'll go back and bore this a little bit bigger and counter bore for the head of the bolt. It's a socket head bolt, and it's a steel bolt, and I want it to sit down flush with this thing. So that's all for now. Alright, so now I've changed bits to the bit for the countersink for the bolt. This is what the bolt looks like. So I'm countersinking the depth of the head, and I'm not clamping this thing in or anything. I'm sort of letting the drill bit find the center. But I did set the depth. Alright, this is the last one. I did the first one before I turned on the camera. So now I'm going to change bits and do in the same piece, widen the hole, because the original hole I drilled was for the tap. I need to widen it to, for the outside diameter of the actual bolt. And again, I'm just going to let the bit find the center. And the depth on this is all the way through, so I'm raising the stop. I'm going to test it real quick and find out little bolt. So there you go. Fits in there perfectly. Let me do the other 3 and start putting it together. And this is the last one. Alright, I'm going to go sand the back of them and then stick them together and see what happens. So I got everything drilled and mounted. These tabs fit in there. I had to deepen the hole a little bit because the screw was bottoming out and I didn't want to cut the screw. So I fixed that and got them mounted, and now I'm drilling the recess for where it mounts on the lugs on the car. And now I'm labeling, like this is the passenger side inside of the fuel rail. So the mating surface is on the inside. And I'm going to do all four of these, or both fuel rails individually and kind of set up as I go. And I'm using a little WD-40 on this and just taking my time. I have to go deeper. I'm going to drill the other one and then check it on the car. Like, it's better to err on the side of having to re-drill than not drill enough. I mean, drill too much. It's more than just lining up the thing on the lugs on the car. You have to make sure that something else isn't in the way, like some piece of the intake isn't hitting the inside of the fuel rail, or something. So I've got to do it bit by bit, unfortunately, until I'm certain I've got it where it's supposed to be. These Forstner bits are amazing. They do not appear to dull. I mean, I'm sure it's dulling, but I tested this on a piece of wood after I finished a little sample piece, and it didn't affect the sharpness of it at all. I've got a stop set on this, so I'm going to go to the same depth as this other hole. All right, I'm going to check it.